A warm welcome to today's video explaining property dualism, possibly the most difficult topic on the spec. I'm going to be breaking down what property dualism actually is. I want to give you a really good understanding of what Chalmers is really trying to get at. I'm then going to break down the P zombies argument and these responses this is just from the AQA website, and the Mary knowledge argument and the responses below as well. I hope you find this video helpful. If you do, consider giving it a like and sharing it with someone who might benefit from it. Now, I open this video by really trying to stress that lots of students really don't get this. And I don't think they get it because they consider substance dualism, they understand what Descartes is trying to say with that, and then they just simply swap out the words of Cartesian dualism for the words of property dualism. So what Descartes is trying to say is there's two distinct types of substances, things that exist in the world. There's the physical things, and there's this whole mental realm. There's mental life, which is ghostly. And Chalmers is doing something very different to what Descartes is trying to do. And so if we just try and think of it in that basic way of swapping out the words, I think that's what leads to lots of misunderstandings. What Chalmers is really trying to do is he's trying to posit as little as possible in order to successfully prove his conclusion. Okay, Descartes is trying to argue for this massive metaphysical world. Chalmers is just trying to show that there are at least some qualities of mind, mental states, that can't be accounted for by a physical model of the world. So Chalmers is looking for, there are some properties. That means there is at least one property. In your essay, you only need to argue for one of these. So you could maybe show that the P zombies argument doesn't work. Maybe intentionality can be argued away. But maybe Mary knowledge is the one that you're going to support and defend, and ultimately show that property dualism is true. So notice how conservative this approach from Chalmers is. He's really not trying to do very much. He's not trying to argue for very much. He just needs to successfully show that there's one phenomenal property, like qualia or consciousness, that is true and can't fully be accounted for by physicalism. That's the idea of what property dualism is. He's not arguing there's this whole other world of properties or anything like that. He's just saying there are some properties, like consciousness or qualia, that we can't fully account for with physicalism. That's the first part of this. The only other part, if you want to get ahead of other students, add a bit of extra depth onto what Chalmers is saying. He's saying that consciousness might be something really fundamental, like a fundamental property of the universe, in the same way that space, time, matter, mass, charge are. And what this means is that consciousness can't really be reduced to anything else. It can't be really explained in any other kind of terms. We need to just explain it in and of itself. And what this means is that consciousness is a irreducible property. So if you want to get ahead and add to your understanding, consider bringing that into your explanations. That's what property dualism is. Let's look at how we get to this conclusion. So we'll begin with Chalmers' argument, P zombies. Now, P zombies is not very difficult to understand if you understand Descartes' conceivability argument. So if you've already studied substance dualism, you'll probably be familiar with this kind of argument. Now, P zombies, and I'll use zombies and P zombies interchangeably. P zombies is the idea that we could have this world, it's at least possible that we have this world of functional, identical duplicates of all of us. And if this is conceivable, there's no contradiction in this idea. If it's conceivable, then it's possible. Because it's possible, we could have, Chalmers isn't saying we do have, but we could have this understanding of the physical world. So we have, in this possible world, we know all the physical facts, and yet we can't account for the lack of consciousness. We can't really account for consciousness at all. But that means a full physical understanding, so all the physical facts are coherent physical model, whichever physicalist theory we choose, all of that knowledge wouldn't be able to account for consciousness. And so there is at least one property, as the definition goes, that doesn't depend on, and is distinct from physical, this physical account. And that's the idea. So if it's possible in some world, then separating consciousness from the physical world is possible. So we have all the physical facts, no account for consciousness. That's what Chalmers is saying. Now the issues of this argument are basically going to criticise the first idea, is we're going to criticise premise 1, we'll then criticise premise 2, and then we're going to criticise the validity of the argument by attacking the conclusion, point 3 here, okay? We'll begin with my favoured one, my favoured response, knocking down whether zombies are conceivable at all. Now, I prefer this one because it just needs to do a bit less than all the criticisms that come after it, because it doesn't need to accept anything, it just can reject the conceivability. So you don't need to bring in explanations of possible worlds and metaphysical and logical possibility. We'll do all of that later, but for this response you don't need to. What Daniel Dennett is saying is that if we try and conceive of a triangle without 3 sides, we run into an immediate contradiction. So conceiving of a triangle not having 3 sides, maybe having 4, is impossible. It's inconceivable. That is a direct contradiction. But what Dennett is saying here is zombies doesn't lead to a direct, immediate contradiction, but if we actually flesh out this idea more, we'll discover that it is actually inconceivable, and there is a contradiction at play here. Now, Dennett argues that consciousness is not this single, wonderful, separable thing. It's a complex system. So when we think of our conscious experience, we're thinking about sense data and how we're aware of that. There's what it is like there. We're thinking of being conscious of our thoughts, our introspection. It's this various complex system, not just a thing. So he's sort of attacking, Chalmers is doing a type of category error here. Consciousness is not the type of thing which can be removed, because in the same way, health is not the type of thing which we can remove from a physical duplicate. Okay? If we just take the body of Usain Bolt, for example, but remove health, but keep the body the same, that just is inconceivable. That's just a contradiction. It's not it's not a coherent idea. In the same way, trying to remove consciousness from a physical duplicate is impossible, because what it means to say consciousness is to rely on and refer to the physical parts. And so P-zombies are not conceivable. Chalmers takes their separability, the idea that consciousness is separable, he takes that for granted, and he's wrong to do that. So premise 1 fails, and the argument fails as well. We'll now move on to criticism 2, the idea that even if they are conceivable, just because it's conceivable, it doesn't entail possibility. Okay? So what's conceivable may not even be possible. So again, second premise here that we're going to try and attack. The idea here is that P-zombies are logically possible. Now you might be thinking about what we've just talked about, I think, well, hold on a minute, I actually don't think that that's true. I don't think that they're conceivable, but this criticism takes that point for granted. So even if premise 1 is true, the argument still doesn't work, because what's possible that doesn't lead to a contradiction may not actually be metaphysically possible. It may not be possible in any world, any possible world. And we can think about this through an example. So if we think about water being H3O, there doesn't seem any direct contradiction there, right? There's nothing directly impossible, inconceivable about that idea. But it isn't possible. And it isn't possible because having 2 hydrogen molecules and 1 oxygen one is an essential property of water. And so it's conceivable, but it isn't possible in any world to separate water and to add a molecule. Because if we add a molecule, we don't have water anymore. But what this means is, we're going to use an analogy now, we're going to turn this back to consciousness and P-zombies. So the idea is that although there isn't a direct contradiction in the idea of P-zombies, consciousness is an essential property of human beings. And so if we remove consciousness, then we don't have a human being at all, and so we can't really have a P-zombie. And so, although there's no contradiction, it isn't actually metaphysically possible in any world. We can't separate consciousness from humans, because if we do, we don't have humans anymore at all. And so it's not possible in any world. It's conceivable, but just not metaphysically possible. Finally, we'll move on to criticizing the validity of this argument. So saying that we could have both conceivability and possibility, so it could be conceivable and possible, but this might not actually tell us anything about the world. For reference, I just don't really like this criticism. I don't think it really works, but it's on the spec, so we'll talk about it. The idea is just that something can be possible and conceivable. Concepts like unicorns or faster than light particles, but the idea is just that this doesn't actually tell us anything about the world. Right, so good reasoning, this is kind of the Hume's fork idea. Good reasoning, good argument, that these sort of analytic a priori claims don't actually tell us anything about the world. They don't prove conclusions about existence. So we're talking about existence. You know, is consciousness a physical or is it a non-physical property? That's an empirical claim. These type of empirical claims can't really be proved by conceivability arguments at all. That would be the idea with this criticism. That's everything you need to know about P-zombies. That's the argument, those are the counters. Now the final argument that we need to understand is the Mary knowledge argument. Now the idea with Mary knowledge is hitting on the same point that P-zombies were, that the same sort of working part, that we could have all the physical facts and yet not know about some phenomenal property. In this case, we're talking more about qualia. So what Jackson is saying is that Mary knows all the physical facts, she goes out into the world, she learns something new. She learns qualia of the colour red. And I'll use red as the example throughout, though you can choose any colour you like. And the idea here, as I've said, is just that we can have a full physical model, no qualia. Therefore, qualia is an example of there being a non-physical property. Therefore, we have property dualism. That's just the idea. Now, this is an ontological claim that Jackson is making. It's a claim about existence. You know, it's a claim that we have all the physical facts, but there exists more in the world. There exists qualia which can't entirely be accounted for physically. And this is a direct challenge to physicalism. There are a few responses to this argument. The first one, that's quite big, is here, the ability knowledge response. The first two responses are basically going to say that Mary did have all the physical facts. She did learn something new, but that's okay, because what she learned wasn't really a knowledge proposition in the same way. So the ability knowledge response is to say that Mary gained no new proposition knowledge, but what she did gain was ability knowledge. She gained ability knowledge because now that she's experienced red, she can do more things, she has more abilities, she can perform more tasks, she can imagine, she can recall, she can recognize the colour red, do lots of things with that concept. And so it's true to say that she did learn something new, but she didn't learn any facts. So having all the physical facts and learning something new is not a problem, because she gained ability knowledge. That's the first response. Now you can do the exact same thing with acquaintance knowledge. Acquaintance knowledge is like this deep familiarity that you only get by like doing, being somewhere, doing something, right? So you can know all the facts about the city of Bristol, but until you are actually there, you learn something new. And so what Mary learns then is Mary is now acquainted with the colour red. Mary gains acquaintance colour qualia only after release. This means that she did not learn any new proposition, but instead gained acquaintance knowledge. She's acquainted with the colour vision now, okay? And this works in the same way. We can just say that it's true to say that Mary did have all the physical facts, but she gained acquaintance knowledge. That's the idea here. So it's not a problem. And then the final response works slightly differently. This idea is about new knowledge and old facts. So imagine that I know about lightning. Okay, I know that lightning exists. Maybe I'm in a thunderstorm and there's lightning outside right now. So I know about that concept. There are multiple ways of learning about that. So I can have new knowledge about an old fact. The way this works is I can know that there's lightning outside, but when I learn that lightning is just electrical charge that is being discharged by clouds, I learn something new about something that I already knew about, right? So I could know that there's lightning outside, but I could not know that there's electrical discharge outside as well. And the idea is just that there's multiple ways of knowing the same thing. And what Mary learned was just a different way of something she already knew. She gained this, and there's a standard form here for you. This is quite technical, as you can read. The idea here is that what Mary experienced was a different way of conceptualizing the same thing. She learned the phenomenal character of blueness or redness. But she actually already knew that fact. And so this means that she didn't learn anything. She just conceptualized things in a different way. And so Mary did know all the physical facts about red. When she sees red, she didn't learn something new, and therefore the argument fails. That's quite a nice way of going about things. That would be my favourite way of going about things. And so the standard form's here if you'd like that, but that's the issue. So, to conclude, property dualism. All it needs to claim is that there are some phenomenal properties that can't be accounted for by a physical model. We use consciousness and p-zombies, or we use Mary knowledge and qualia. That's the idea. I really hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for watching.